The divine Plaith eternal spire shook for the first time in 10 million years. High Counselor Zirith watched in horror as another section of the celestial realm simply vanished, consumed by the advancing darkness. The Shadow Devourers had found them. The council chamber erupted in panic as beings of pure light and energy flickered with fear. These were the Ascended Ones, creatures that had evolved beyond physical form eons ago. They had guided lesser species, granted wisdom to the worthy, and maintained cosmic balance since the universe was young. Now they faced extinction. Another sector gone, reported Counselor Nyx, her crystalline form resonating with anguish. The Devourers consumed the Wisdom Gardens and the Hall of Eternal Peace. 17 million years of accumulated knowledge, simply erased. Zirith's energy form pulsed with desperate determination. The Shadow Devourers were entities from outside reality itself, creatures that fed on consciousness, memory, and the very essence of existence. They had already consumed 3 other divine realms, leaving nothing but empty void in their wake. "We need champions," Zirith declared, his voice echoing through dimensions. "Mortals who can wield our power and fight where we cannot." The Devourers consume divine essence, but mortal souls burn differently. They might be able to resist the feeding long enough to strike back. The search began immediately. Council scouts spread across the galaxy, seeking worlds where worthy champions might be found. They looked for planets with strong warrior traditions, noble knights, wise philosophers, and pure-hearted heroes. The kind of mortals who appeared in their own legends and myths. What they found instead changed everything they thought they knew. About heroism, Scout Lyrian materialized in the council chamber 3 days later, her usually pristine energy form, crackling with static distortion. "I have found a world," she announced, "but I do not understand what I witnessed." The planetary data she projected showed a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star, the 3rd planet in its system, covered in vast oceans and diverse landmasses. It looked peaceful enough, even beautiful. "The inhabitants call it Earth," Lyrian continued. "The dominant species calls themselves humans. They have achieved basic space travel and nuclear technology, suggesting adequate intelligence. But their world ... double quotes," she paused, energy form flickering with confusion. "Their world is trying to kill them." The data streams that followed painted a picture of a planet that seemed designed for maximum lethality. Weather systems that could level cities, geological activity that reshaped continents, an atmosphere that could spawn storms with the power of divine wrath, microscopic organisms that could kill in days, large predators that hunted in packs, plants that were toxic to the touch. "A death world," whispered Counselor Vex. "How do they survive?" "They adapt," Lyrian replied, "constantly. I observed their military forces conducting training exercises. They simulate combat scenarios that would terrify veteran warriors from 100 worlds. Their medical facilities treat injuries that would be fatal to most species as routine emergencies. Their children learn to identify dozens of ways their own planet might kill them before they reach maturity." Zirith studied the data with growing interest. "What of their character? Are they noble? Do they possess honor and compassion?" "They are ... double quotes." Lyrian struggled to find the words. "Complex. They wage wars against each other, yet rush to help strangers in disasters. They create art of stunning beauty while building weapons of terrible destruction. They will sacrifice everything for their families, yet compete ruthlessly for resources. They are simultaneously the most cooperative and most competitive species I have ever observed." "Not exactly the pure-hearted champions we hoped for," Counselor Nyx observed. "Perhaps not," Zirith agreed, "but they are survivors. And right now, survival matters more than purity." The decision was made. First contact protocols were established. and a delegation was sent to Earth. The Ascended Ones expected to address kings and priests, to speak with the wise and noble leaders of humanity. Instead, they found themselves in a concrete bunker beneath a mountain, facing a table of humans in military uniforms. General Sarah Chun sat at the head of the table, her dark eyes studying the shimmering energy beings with the calm assessment of someone who had spent 30 years evaluating threats. Around her sat experts in linguistics, physics, psychology, and warfare. Not one of them looked impressed by the divine visitors. "Let me get this straight," General Chun said, after the Ascended Ones had finished their explanation. "You're godlike. Beings from another dimension. Your realm is being invaded by cosmic horror monsters, and you want us to become your champions and fight them for you." "That is a simplified but accurate summary," Zereth replied, his energy form brightening with hope. "We offer great power, the ability to wield forces beyond mortal comprehension, and the chance to save not just your world, but entire dimensions from destruction." Hung. General Chun leaned back in her chair. "And what's the catch?" The question caught the Ascended Ones off guard. In their experience, mortals either begged for such gifts or recoiled in terror from the responsibility. They had never been asked about the practical complications. The shadow devourers consume consciousness, Counselor Nix explained hesitantly. Champions who face them risk having their minds, memories, and souls devoured. The process is ... unpleasant. So we might go insane, lose our identities, or die horribly, said Dr. James Walsh, a mission psychologist. Anything else? The powers we grant change the bearer, added Counselor Vex. You would no longer be entirely human. The transformation is irreversible, right? General Chun made a note on her tablet. Timeline? The Devourers will breach our final defenses within 30 of your days, Zareth said urgently. After that, they will spread to consume other realities, including your own dimension. Everything you know and love will be erased from existence. So, we're on a deadline. General Chun looked around the table at her team. Questions? Dr. Walsh raised his hand. What kind of success rate are we looking at? How many champions have you recruited from other worlds? The silence that followed was telling. You are the first, Lyrian admitted quietly. Other worlds we approached either lacked the necessary technology to understand our situation, or their inhabitants fled in terror when they learned the truth. Colonel Martinez, the military strategist, frowned. So we're not just the first. Humans, you've asked. We're the first anyone you've managed to actually talk to about this. That is correct. And you came to us because our planet is so dangerous that you figured we might be crazy enough to actually say yes? Added Dr. Sarah Kim, the xenobiologist. Your world has produced survivors, Zareth said defensively. We need survivors, not just heroes. General Chun was quiet for a long moment, staring at the energy beings with an expression that had unnerved dictators and terrorists across 3 continents. Finally, she spoke. We'll do it. But we do this our way, with our people, using our methods. You provide the power and the transportation. We provide the strategy and the execution. And when this is over, you leave Earth alone unless we specifically invite you back. Deal? The speed of the decision shocked the Ascended Ones. They had expected hours of debate, soul-searching, and careful consideration of the moral implications. Instead, these humans had treated it like a military briefing and made their choice based on tactical necessity. You do not wish to discuss this with your leaders, your people? Zareth asked. I am discussing it with the people who matter, General Chun replied. My government will back whatever decision we make here, because they trust our judgment. That's how our chain of command works. But the risks? We've been managing risks since the day we evolved, Colonel Martinez interjected. This is just Another Tuesday for us, Doctor. Kim leaned forward. How many champions do you need? Traditionally, cosmic threats require a chosen hero, perhaps with a small band of noble companions, Counselor Nix replied. 5 to 7 individuals of pure heart and unshakable will. Right. General Chun tapped her tablet. We'll give you 200. 200? The energy beings flickered with shock. But the power requirements, the transformation process, we have never attempted to empower so many at once. Then, you'll learn, Dr. Walsh said matter-of-factly. We don't do small teams when the stakes are this high. We do overwhelming force and redundant systems. If 5 champions might save the universe, then 200 champions will definitely save the universe. But how will you choose them? Lyrian asked. What tests of worthiness will you employ? Easy, General Chun smiled for the first time since. The meeting began, and the expression was not entirely reassuring. We'll ask for volunteers? The recruitment process that followed defied everything the Ascended Ones thought they knew about mortal psychology. When the call went out through Earth's military networks, applications flooded in from every branch of service, every special operations unit, and every combat zone on the planet. The volunteers weren't motivated by glory or divine reward. They signed up because someone had to, and they were the best qualified to handle impossible situations. They were soldiers, pilots, medics, engineers, and scientists who had spent their careers preparing for the worst-case scenarios they're dangerous. World could throw at them, thought. The Ascended Ones watched in amazement as humans lined up for a chance to fight cosmic horrors that could erase their very existence from reality. These mortals didn't see it as a divine calling or a heroic quest. They saw it as a job that needed doing, and they were the ones trained to do it. Your species is remarkable, Zirith observed as he watched the volunteers undergo their transformation. The divine power flowed into them, changing their bodies and expanding their minds, but they adapted to it with the same calm professionalism they brought to everything else. We're survivors, replied Captain Lisa Torres, her body now glowing with celestial energy. Evolution on a death world doesn't produce saints or philosophers. It produces apex predators who learn to work together. You want to save the universe? You called the right species. As the newly empowered human champions prepared for deployment to the celestial realm, the Ascended Ones began to realize they might have made a mistake. These weren't the noble heroes of legend they had expected. These were something far more dangerous. They were humans who had been given the power of gods, and they were about to remind the universe why Earth was classified as a death world. Asterisk. When mortals became legends, the shadow devourers struck the celestial realm like a tide of liquid darkness, expecting to find the same cowering divine beings they had consumed in 3 previous realms. Instead, they found 200 humans who had spent the last week treating divine powers like new military equipment and learning how to weaponize miracles. Captain Torres crouched behind a barrier of crystallized light, her enhanced senses tracking the movement of entities that existed partially outside normal spacetime. The divine power coursing through her body felt strange, but no stranger than the first time she had used night vision goggles or operated in zero gravity. It was just another tool, and she was very good with tools. Contact left, approximately 50 meters. She whispered into her communication device, which had been enhanced with celestial technology to work across dimensional barriers. Multiple entities, moving information. They're trying to flank us. The response came from Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who is currently invisible and phasing through solid matter. Copy that. 1 count 12, maybe 15. They're definitely coordinated. This isn't just feeding behavior. High Counselor Zirith watched a tactical display with growing amazement. The human champions had been in the celestial realm for less than an hour, and they had already established a defensive perimeter, identified enemy movement patterns, and begun coordinating counterattacks. The Ascended Ones had spent centuries trying to understand the Shadow Devourers. The humans had spent 20 minutes and already knew more about their enemy than the gods did. How are they doing this? Counselor Nyx asked, her energy form flickering with confusion. The Devourers are beings of pure entropy. They should be incomprehensible to mortal minds. They're treating them like any other hostile force, replied Dr. Kim, who was using her enhanced perceptions to study the enemy from a safe distance. Observe their behavior, identify their capabilities, look for weaknesses, develop countermeasures. Standard protocol for encountering unknown threats. But these are cosmic horrors. So are hurricanes, volcanoes, and plague outbreaks, Dr. Kim said without looking away from her instruments. We've been dealing with incomprehensible destructive forces since before we invented agriculture. This is just another natural disaster that needs to be managed. The first major engagement came when a group of shadow devourers attempted to consume the archive of eternal wisdom, a repository of knowledge that predated most civilizations. The human response was swift and utterly unexpected. Sergeant First Class Murphy, a combat engineer from Chicago, had been studying the archive's defensive systems for all of 10 minutes when he made his move. Instead of trying to fight the devourers directly, he rigged the archive's storage crystals to overload when touched by shadow essence. Fire in the hole, Murphy shouted, then detonated what amounted to an information bomb that sent cascading waves of pure knowledge to the attacking entities. The shadow devourers, creatures that fed on consciousness and memory, suddenly found themselves force-fed the entire history of galactic civilization. They writhed in agony as billions of years of accumulated wisdom flooded their feeding mechanisms, overloading their ability to process consumed thoughts. Outstanding work, Murphy. General Chun's voice came through the communication system. All units, you see what happens when you make these things eat more than they can handle. Exploit that weakness. The Ascended Ones stared in shock as the cosmic horrors that had terrified them for months began retreating from a single human with some improvised explosives and a basic understanding of information theory. How did he know that would work? Zirith asked. Murphy grew up in Chicago, Captain Torres replied, as if that explained everything. He's been dealing with things that want to consume everything he cares about since he was old enough to walk. The only difference is scale. The battle that followed redefined the concept of asymmetric warfare. The shadow devourers possessed overwhelming power and had consumed entire dimensions, but they had never faced an enemy that treated cosmic horror as a tactical problem to be solved. Lieutenant Colonel Jackson, a former Special Operations pilot, discovered that the Devourers' extra-dimensional nature made them vulnerable to spatial distortion. He began using his newly acquired ability to manipulate gravity to create miniature black holes that trapped the entities in dimensional loops. Major Williams, a military intelligence officer, realized that the Devourers communicated through shared consciousness, making them vulnerable to psychological warfare. She began broadcasting traumatic memories from Earth's most brutal conflicts directly into their collective mind, causing system-wide panic among creatures that had never experienced fear. Commander Park, a naval officer with expertise in submarine warfare, figured out how to hide entire sections of the celestial realm using dimensional cloaking techniques, turning the god's own realm into a maze of hidden passages and ambush points. The Ascended Ones watched in growing amazement as their supposedly inferior mortal champions dismantled a cosmic threat that had seemed unstoppable. These humans didn't fight with honor or nobility. They fought to win, using every dirty trick, underhanded tactic, and brutal strategy that millions of years of evolution on a death world had taught them. This is not how heroes are supposed to behave, Counselor Vex observed as he watched Corporal Davis used divine healing powers to torture a captured devourer by repeatedly regenerating its ability to feel pain. "These aren't heroes," Dr. Walsh replied, his voice carrying the calm tone of someone stating an obvious fact. "These are soldiers. Heroes fight for glory and honor. Soldiers fight to go home." The turning point came when the humans discovered the Shadow Devourer's central weakness. The entities were connected to a primary consciousness that coordinated their attacks and shared consumed knowledge. It was hidden in a pocket dimension that the Ascended Ones had declared impenetrable. Impenetrable to who? Asked Master Sergeant Brooks, a demolitions expert who had spent 15 years finding ways to break things that weren't supposed to be breakable. The assault on the pocket dimension was led by Captain Torres and a team of 12 volunteers. They didn't try to fight their way through the dimensional barriers. Instead, they used their combined divine powers to literally fold space-time around themselves, creating a bubble of normal reality that they could navigate through the enemy's stronghold. Asterisk. A primary consciousness was an entity of pure thought and hunger that had existed since before the first stars burned. It commanded legions of shadow devourers and had consumed the knowledge of countless civilizations. It was utterly unprepared. For 12 humans with military-grade explosives and a complete disregard for the established laws of reality. Target acquired, Torres reported as they surrounded the massive entity. Requesting permission to engage. Permission granted came. General Chun's voice. Light it up. The humans didn't try to fight the primary consciousness on its own terms. They didn't attempt to match its cosmic power or engage in philosophical debates about the nature of existence. They simply treated it like a high-value target that needed to be eliminated, and they had brought enough firepower to level a small city. The explosion that followed could be seen from 3 dimensions. The primary consciousness, a being that had devoured gods and consumed realities, was reduced to component atoms by humans who had learned to weaponize the very forces of creation. With their central intelligence destroyed, the remaining shadow devourers lost all coordination. Some continued attacking randomly, but most simply faded away, their connection to the feeding network severed. Within hours, the cosmic threat that had terrified the Ascended Ones for months was eliminated. Aftermath was a mixture of celebration and profound confusion. The celestial realm was saved, but the Ascended Ones found themselves looking at their mortal champions with something approaching fear. "You have exceeded all expectations," Zereth said carefully as he addressed the assembled humans. "The universe owes you a debt that can never be repaid." "Just doing our job," General Chun replied. "Though I have to say, your cosmic horror problem was pretty standard as far as existential threats go. We deal with worse stuff every hurricane season." "Worse?" Counselor Nix's energy form flickered with disbelief. How could anything be worse than entities that consume entire realities? "Well, hurricanes don't just erase you from existence," explained Dr. Kim. "They destroy your infrastructure, contaminate your water supply, create breeding grounds for disease, and leave you to slowly starve while fighting off looters and trying to rebuild civilization." The Shadow Devourers were actually pretty merciful by comparison. Quick, clean, no suffering. The Ascended Ones exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey existential dread despite being made of pure energy. "Your species is terrifying," Lyrian observed. "Our species is effective," Captain Torres corrected. "There's a difference." As the human champions prepared to return to Earth, word of their victory spread throughout the galaxy. The story of mortals who had defeated cosmic horrors with nothing but military tactics and pure stubbornness became legend among civilizations that had spent millennia hiding from threats they considered unbeatable. The Galactic Council, a confederation of peaceful species, sent a formal request for Earth to join their alliance. The message was politely declined, with a note that humanity preferred to handle its own affairs and would be available for consultation if any more cosmic horror problems arose. "We should recruit more champions from Earth," Counselor Vex suggested, as they watched the humans depart. "Having access to such effective warriors would ensure our realm's safety." "No," Zereth replied firmly. "We asked for heroes to save us from monsters. They succeeded, but in doing so, they reminded us that the line between heroes and monsters is often just a matter of perspective. Earth's champions are too dangerous to summon casually." High above Earth's atmosphere, General Chun looked down at the blue-green world that had produced the most effective soldiers in galactic history. Her body still glowed with residual divine energy, and she could feel the enhanced abilities that would stay with her for the rest of her life. "Think they'll call us again?" Captain Torres asked from the shuttle's co-pilot's seat. "Eventually," General Chun replied. "The universe is a dangerous place, and peaceful civilizations always need someone to handle their worst problems. When they do, they'll call the species that learn to thrive on a death world. And we'll answer? Of course. It's what we do." As the shuttle descended toward Earth, the galaxy's newest legend was already being written. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, other cosmic threats were stirring. Other impossible enemies were preparing to emerge from the darkness between stars. When they did, they would learn what countless predators on Earth had learned before. Them, humans, were the species that had looked at a world designed to kill them and decided to call it home. Everything else was just practice. The universe had asked for heroes. Earth had sent something far more dangerous. Humans who treated heroism like a job that needed to be done, right? Asterisk.